You wake up in the morning and feel something off, a sense of displacement you can't quite explain to anyone. While the people around you seem perfectly at home in this era, you feel like you belong to another time, another age. It's not superficial nostalgia for decades past or romanticizing historical periods. It's something deeper, almost visceral. You look at the modern world with its endless social media feeds, its instant gratification culture, its superficiality celebrated as a virtue, and you feel an emptiness that no one around you seems to share. In everyday conversations, you notice your values sound old-fashioned, your concerns seem out of place, your yearning for depth and genuine meaning is met with confused looks. At night, lying in bed, you wonder if there's something wrong with you, if this feeling of being born in the wrong era is a sign of maladjustment or weakness. You try to fit in, consume what everyone consumes, value what everyone values, but the feeling of being in the wrong place at the wrong time only grows. This existential discomfort you carry in silence, this intimate certainty that you belong to something different, might not be the problem you imagine. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps and founded logotherapy, discovered something revolutionary about this kind of existential suffering. And what he found can completely transform how you view this feeling of temporal displacement. Frankl realized that often what we interpret as pathological maladjustment is actually an existential calling to a unique purpose that only we can fulfill. Frankl's story begins in Vienna in the early 20th century, when he was a young doctor fascinated by the deepest questions of human existence. From an early age, he noticed something his mentors Freud and Adler seemed to overlook. While Freud reduced human motivation to the pursuit of pleasure and Adler to the pursuit of power, Frankl observed in his patients something more fundamental, an insatiable thirst for meaning, for purpose, for something that transcended mere comfort or status. He noticed that many of his patients who came to him with depression, anxiety, and various neurotic symptoms weren't suffering from repressed sexual traumas or inferiority complexes, but rather from what he would later call existential emptiness. These people had everything society said they should have to be happy, but they felt their lives lacked deep meaning. And what's most interesting is that many of these people described exactly what you feel now, the sense of not belonging to your own time, of having values and yearnings that seemed out of sync with the historical context in which they lived. Frankl began to develop the idea that this feeling wasn't necessarily a problem to be cured, but possibly a signal to be interpreted. In 1942, when Frankl and his family were deported to the concentration camps, he had the terrible and unique opportunity to test his theories under the most extreme conditions imaginable. In the camps, surrounded by death, degradation, and absolute despair, Frankl observed something extraordinary. Some prisoners, despite all the physical and psychological deprivations, maintained an inner dignity that seemed impossible under those circumstances. And many of these prisoners were precisely those who had always felt out of place in their previous lives, people who had never fully adapted to the social conventions of their times, individuals who had always sought something deeper than cultural norms offered. Frankl realized that these people possessed something he called inner freedom, the last of human freedoms. Even when everything was taken from them, when they were reduced to numbers, stripped of their identity, name, external dignity, the freedom to choose what attitude to adopt in the face of inevitable suffering still remained. And this freedom, Frankl discovered, was strongest in those who had always questioned the ready-made narratives of their eras, in those who had always felt there was something more beyond established conventions. This fundamental discovery led Frankl to develop the central concept of his logotherapy, the will to meaning. Unlike Freud's will to pleasure or Adler's will to power, the will to meaning is not a sublimation of more basic impulses, but the primary motivation of human beings. And here is the crucial revelation for you who feel you were born in the wrong era. Frankl argued that each person has a unique meaning to fulfill, a specific purpose that only they can accomplish in this exact historical moment in which they exist. The feeling of temporal displacement you experience is not a defect, but can be precisely the indicator that your existential purpose doesn't align with the dominant values of the era. And this, far from being a weakness, can be your greatest strength. In the camps, Frankl observed that those who survived were not necessarily the physically strongest, but those who had a why to live for, a future meaning to fulfill. He saw men who seemed perfectly healthy give up and die within days, while others physically debilitated remained alive against all odds because they had something to live for. Frankl then developed the idea that human beings can endure any how as long as they have a strong enough why. And this why, he discovered, often emerges precisely from the tension between who we are and the context in which we exist. When you feel you don't belong to this era, you are experiencing what Frankl would call noetic tension, a tension in the specifically human dimension of existence, the dimension of meaning and values. This tension is not something to be eliminated through adjustments or therapies aimed at your adaptation to prevailing norms. On the contrary, it is this tension that can reveal your unique existential purpose. Frankl used to say that humans don't need equilibrium or homeostasis, but something to strive for, something that challenges them to transcend their present situation. The feeling of having been born in the wrong era creates exactly this productive tension. You are not at peace with the superficial values of contemporary culture. You don't find satisfaction in the easy solutions modernity offers for deep questions. You can't settle for simplistic narratives about what makes a life meaningful. This restlessness, this constant dissatisfaction, far from being pathological, can be the engine that drives you toward your unique meaning. Frankl introduced the concept of the noetic dimension of existence to distinguish the specifically human from the merely biological or psychological. In this noetic dimension reside our capacity to find meaning, our freedom of choice, our existential responsibility. And one of the fundamental characteristics of this dimension is what he called the capacity for self-distancing, the human ability to distance oneself, from one's circumstances, even from one's era. When you feel you were born in the wrong era, you are exercising this capacity for self-distancing. You can place yourself outside your historical context and critically evaluate it. This is not pathological alienation, but rather a manifestation of specifically human freedom to transcend given circumstances. Most people are completely immersed in their time, uncritically accepting dominant values, adapting without question to available cultural narratives. You, on the other hand, maintain a critical distance that allows you to see both the limitations and possibilities of the present moment. Frankl also spoke of self-transcendence, the human capacity to go beyond oneself towards a meaning to be fulfilled or another person to be found. Self-transcendence implies that the human being always points to something beyond himself, always exists in relation to something or someone who is not himself. Your feeling of temporal displacement can be interpreted as a form of self-transcendence, a pointing towards values and meanings that transcend the immediate historical moment. You are not imprisoned in the cultural present, but can glimpse and long for something that goes beyond the limitations of the now. This is extraordinarily valuable because it means you are not doomed to simply reproduce the patterns of your era, but have the capacity to contribute something new, something that transcends the contemporary zeitgeist. And now I want to pause and really talk to you. I know many of you watching this video silently carry this feeling of temporal displacement, feeling like you're the only ones who can't quite adapt to the pace and values of today's world. So tell me here in the comments, have you ever felt that your deepest values and longings don't find a place in this era, that you were born at the wrong time? If so, simply write, "I feel this temporal displacement," nothing more. And know that by doing so, you are helping others here in the comments feel less alone. It is often liberating just to see that others go through the exact same thing and carry this same tension between who they are and the world they live in. Your courage to speak about it in the comments creates a safe space for others who feel isolated in this experience. When you share, you not only validate your own experience, but show dozens of others that they are not alone in this search for something deeper than contemporary culture offers. Let's create a community of courage and authenticity here. Frankl developed the idea that each historical era has its own existential tasks and challenges, and different people are called to respond to different aspects of these challenges. You who feel you were born in the wrong era may be precisely called to bring something lost into the present, values that have been forgotten, depths that have been abandoned. Your feeling of not belonging may be an indicator that your purpose involves serving as a bridge between what was and what can be, between the lost wisdoms of the past and the unrecognized needs of the present. In his clinical practice after the war, Frankl worked with countless patients who presented what he called noogenic neurosis, a neurosis originating not from psychological conflicts or traumas, but from existential emptiness, a lack of meaning. Many of these patients described symptoms of anxiety, depression, and despair that could not be traced to traditional psychological causes. They simply felt their lives lacked deep meaning, that they were living inauthentically, disconnected from their deepest values. And a recurring theme in these cases was precisely the feeling of displacement, the sense that the values that truly mattered to them found no space or validation in the contemporary world. Frankl did not treat these patients by trying to make them fit better into society, or by having them accept dominant values. Instead, he helped them recognize that their maladjustment could be healthy, that their refusal to fully conform to cultural expectations could be a sign of existential integrity. Franklian logotherapy proposes that the therapist helps the patient discover the unique meaning that their particular life has to fulfill at this specific moment. And for you who feel you were born in the wrong era, this means asking, what specific meaning does my presence in this particular era allow me to fulfill? What unique contribution can I make precisely by being here now, with these values that seem anachronistic, with this perspective that seems out of place? Frankl introduced a therapeutic technique called de-reflection, which involves diverting the patient's attention from themselves and directing it towards the meaning to be fulfilled. When you become obsessed with the feeling of temporal displacement, when you focus exclusively on the discomfort of not belonging, you become trapped in a spiral of negative self-consciousness. De-reflection proposes that you redirect your attention from the feeling of inadequacy to the question, given that I have this unique perspective, these different values, this particular sensitivity, what does this empower me to do that others cannot? Your temporal displacement is not a problem to be solved, but a characteristic to be utilized towards a purpose. Frankl also spoke of paradoxical intention, a technique where the patient is encouraged to desire precisely that which they fear. In your case, this would mean fully embracing your condition as temporally displaced, stopping fighting against it, stopping trying to force yourself into contemporary expectations, and instead asking, if I truly don't belong to this era the way others do, what freedom does this give me? What unique responsibility does this confer upon me? One of Frankl's most powerful ideas is that meaning cannot be given or arbitrarily invented, but must be discovered. Every life situation contains a potential meaning waiting to be realized, but this meaning must be detected through what Frankl called conscience. He referred to conscience not in the conventional moral sense, but as an organ of meaning, an intuitive capacity to perceive what a particular situation is asking of us. Your feeling of temporal displacement might just be your conscience trying to tell you something crucial, that you have a specific task that can't be accomplished by someone perfectly adapted to the era. Think about the great cultural transformers in history. Many of them were profoundly out of sync with their times. Socrates questioning the certainties of Athens, Jesus challenging established religious structures, Galileo defending truths that contradicted the consensus of his day. These individuals weren't misfits out of weakness, but because they saw something their contemporaries didn't, because they had access to truths or values that transcended the immediate historical moment. Their discomfort with the era wasn't pathological, but prophetic in the deepest sense. They were tuned into possibilities that hadn't yet materialized, values not yet recognized, truths waiting to emerge. Frankl would say each of them was responding to the unique call of their conscience, fulfilling a meaning only they could realize at that specific moment in history. You who feel you were born in the wrong era need to consider the possibility that this feeling isn't a sign you should have lived in another time, but that you have a unique contribution to make precisely now. Maybe you're here now precisely to bring something this era is missing. Maybe your sensitivity to seemingly old-fashioned values is exactly what the present needs. Maybe your discomfort with contemporary superficiality is the call to offer depth. Maybe your misfit status is your credential for transformation. Frankl insisted that life's meaning differs from person to person, from moment to moment, and therefore there's no universal answer to the question of meaning. What exists is the concrete task each situation presents us, the unique demand each moment makes of us specifically. Your temporal displacement isn't a condemnation to a meaningless life, but can be precisely the indicator of your unique meaning. The question isn't how to eliminate this feeling, but how to utilize it, how to transform it into meaningful action. Frankl spoke about the three main avenues through which we can find meaning in life. The first avenue is through creative actions or accomplishments, contributing something of value to the world. For you who feel temporarily out of sync, this might mean creating something that embodies the values you feel are lacking in the current era. It could be art that brings depth in an age of shallowness, thought that offers nuance in times of extreme simplification, actions that demonstrate seemingly forgotten virtues. Your creation doesn't need to be grand to be significant. What matters is that it represents an authentic manifestation of the values you yearn for. The second avenue to meaning, according to Frankl, is through lived experiences or encounters with others. You who feel out of place may find profound meaning by connecting with others who share this sensation, creating spaces where depth is valued, relationships where authenticity is possible, communities that honor the values the contemporary world seems to have abandoned. Your temporal displacement might be what allows you to recognize and deeply connect with others who also don't quite fit the era, forging networks of meaning that transcend the present cultural limitations. The third avenue to meaning, and perhaps the most relevant for you, is through the attitude we adopt in the face of unavoidable suffering. Frankl discovered in the concentration camps that when we cannot change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves, to transform our suffering into a human achievement. Suffering itself has no meaning, but we can give meaning to suffering through the attitude we choose to adopt in its presence. Your feeling of temporal displacement is a form of existential suffering. You can't simply decide to feel perfectly at home in this era if that doesn't align with your authentic experience. But you can choose the attitude you adopt toward this displacement. You can see it as a curse or a calling, a flaw or a differentiator, a weakness or a strength. If these ideas are resonating deeply with you, if you feel you've finally found someone who understands this search for genuine meaning amidst the feeling of not fully belonging to your own time, subscribe to this channel. Here we explore Frankl's thought and other humanist philosophers weekly, offering real answers to the existential void so many of us carry in silence. You don't have to walk alone on this journey of self-discovery. Hit that subscribe button and become part of this community of people brave enough to question, seek, and grow. This is a safe space to explore the deeper dimensions of human existence, where your feeling of displacement won't be pathologized, but understood as part of a legitimate quest for authentic meaning. Frankl also developed the concept of supersense, the idea that there is an ultimate meaning that transcends our individual understanding, and integrates all particular meanings into a coherent whole, even if we can't fully grasp it. For you who feel born in the wrong era, this offers a comforting perspective. Even if you don't fully understand why you are here now, why you hold these specific values in this particular historical moment, you can trust that there is a larger meaning at play. Your presence in this era is not an absurd accident, but part of a bigger pattern of significance even if you can't see the full picture. Frankl rejected both naive optimism and nihilistic pessimism, proposing instead what he called tragic optimism, the capacity to maintain an affirmative attitude toward life despite the tragic triad of human existence: pain, guilt, and death. Tragic optimism acknowledges that life contains unavoidable suffering, that we make mistakes and have limitations, that our existence is finite. Yet it still affirms that life is worth living because we can transform the negative into the positive through our choices and attitudes. Your feeling of temporal displacement is part of this tragic triad of your particular existence. You can't simply will this feeling away through sheer willpower or positive thinking, but you can transform it into something meaningful through the attitude you choose to adopt. In his later works, Frankl increasingly emphasized the importance of existential responsibility. He argued that the fundamental question isn't what we expect from life, but what life expects from us. Life questions us through every concrete situation, and our task is to respond by being responsible for our choices and actions. For you who feel you were born in the wrong era, this means asking, what is this specific time, with all its limitations and problems, asking of me? What unique answer can I give precisely? Because I have this different perspective, these seemingly out-of-place values, this particular sensitivity. Frankl insisted we are responsible not only for what we do, but also for what we refuse to do, not only for the possibilities we realize, but also for those we let slip away. Your temporal displacement presents you with unique possibilities for action and contribution. You can choose to ignore these possibilities, to try to conform completely to the era's expectations, to silence your inner voice that says something more is possible. Or you can take responsibility for these unique possibilities that only you can fulfill. The choice is yours, and that is the essence of human freedom that not even the concentration camps could take from Frankl. The Viennese psychiatrist also spoke of anticipating future meaning as a powerful motivating force. He observed in the camps that those who had something to live for in the future, an unfinished task, a book to write, a loved one waiting, were more capable of enduring present suffering. You who feel born in the wrong era need to cultivate a vision of future meaning that utilizes precisely your unique perspective. What difference can you make in 5, 10, 20 years by having brought something to this era that it was losing? What contribution can you offer that only someone with your particular sensitivity can give? Visualizing this future meaning isn't escapism, but a legitimate way to mobilize energy and direction in the present. Frankl distinguished between happiness and meaning in a way that is crucial for you to understand. He argued that happiness cannot be pursued directly, but only happens as a byproduct of dedication to a meaning. When you chase happiness, it flees. When you dedicate yourself to something greater than yourself, happiness emerges spontaneously. Your temporal displacement may be causing unhappiness precisely because you're focused on the negative feeling of not belonging, instead of focusing on the unique meaning that this not belonging allows you to fulfill. Stop chasing the feeling of a perfect fit with the era and start pursuing the meaning that your unique perspective enables. Happiness can then emerge not from forced adjustment, but from the authentic realization of your purpose. An often misunderstood aspect of Frankl's thought is his emphasis on the unique and unrepeatable nature of each situation. He rejected empty generalizations and insisted that meaning must be discovered concretely in each moment. This means there is no single, general answer to what you should do with your feeling of temporal displacement. The answer must emerge from the encounter between you and your specific life situation. What concrete opportunities does your current context offer? Who can you reach? What problems can you address? What values can you embody in tangible actions? Meaning isn't found in grand abstractions, but in the concrete choices you make today, right now, facing the real possibilities your life presents. Frankl also warned against what he called reductionism, the tendency to explain complex human phenomena through simple biological or psychological causes. Many mental health professionals might try to reduce your feeling of temporal displacement to some childhood trauma, brain chemical imbalance, or psychological defense mechanism. While biological and psychological factors certainly influence our experience, Frankl insisted that the noetic, specifically human, dimension cannot be reduced to these causes. Your feeling of displacement may have psychological components, but at its core, it is an existential matter, a question of meaning and values, and it needs to be addressed at that level. One of Frankl's most original contributions was his analysis of the existential vacuum as a central phenomenon of modernity. He observed that while in earlier eras people had clear traditions and values that told them what to do, in the modern age, these traditional structures have weakened. We no longer automatically know what we should do because traditions no longer tell us. And we often don't know what we want to do because we lack access to our deepest motivations. This results in conformity, doing what others do, or totalitarianism, doing what others want us to do. Your feeling of temporal displacement may be an acute manifestation of this modern existential vacuum, but it can also be the beginning of the solution. By realizing that the era's dominant values don't resonate with you, You are exercising precisely the freedom Frankl identified as essentially human. The freedom to question, to seek, to choose your own values based on your authentic conscience rather than simply conforming or obeying. Frankl spoke about the importance of self-transcendence through commitment to causes that go beyond the self. He observed that the most fulfilled human beings are not those focused on their own happiness or self-actualization, but those dedicated to something greater than themselves, a cause, a loved one, a vocation. Your temporal displacement can be transformed from a curse into a blessing when you use it to commit yourself to something that transcends your personal experience of discomfort. Perhaps it's preserving and passing on values at risk of being lost. Perhaps it's creating spaces of depth amidst cultural superficiality. Perhaps it's simply demonstrating through your life that it's possible to live with integrity, even when it means not fitting in perfectly. If you're starting to see your feeling of temporal displacement in a new light, if these ideas from Frankl are illuminating possibilities you hadn't considered before, please hit that like button so more people can discover this transformative perspective. The YouTube algorithm favors videos with high engagement, so your like actively helps bring these ideas to others who also feel out of sync and are searching for meaning. You're not just consuming content, you're actively participating in the dissemination of a philosophy that can transform lives. Every like is a small act of existential responsibility, contributing to more people finding these answers. Frankl also developed the idea that meaning can be found not just in extraordinary actions, but in the simplest everyday choices. He used to tell the story of an elderly patient who was deeply depressed by the death of his wife. Frankl asked him, "What would have happened if you had died first and your wife had survived?" The man replied that she would have suffered terribly. Frankl then said, "You see, your suffering has spared her that suffering. She was spared that, and it was you who spared her, even though now you have to pay for it by surviving and mourning her." This simple shift in perspective transformed the man's senseless suffering into a meaningful sacrifice. For you who feel you were born in the wrong era, a similar transformation of perspective is possible. Your suffering of displacement can be transformed into significant contribution when you realize that precisely because you feel this tension, you can offer something others cannot. Your discomfort is not random punishment, but may be the price you pay for having a unique perspective that this era needs. The Franklian concept of responsibility is particularly relevant here. Frankl would say that to be human means to be responsible, to be questioned by life, and to have to answer for our choices. No one can answer for you. No one can fulfill your unique meaning. Your temporal displacement presents a responsibility that only you can take on. You can shy away from it through forced conformity or cynical resignation, or you can embrace it and ask, "Given my unique perspective, what responsibility does that confer upon me? What answer is life waiting for from me specifically?" Frankl insisted that we are responsible to something or someone, whether it be a cause, a person, or simply our own conscience. For you, this means that your feeling of displacement is not just a subjective matter of personal comfort, but a matter of objective responsibility. You have a responsibility not to waste the unique perspective you possess, not to silence the inner voice that sees beyond the limitations of the age. Returning to where we began, you wake up in the morning feeling that familiar displacement, but now with a different understanding. You realize this feeling is not a defect to be corrected, but a characteristic to be utilized. Life is asking you a question through this displacement. Given that you see what others do not, value what others do not, yearn for what others do not, what are you going to do with it? Will you waste this unique perspective by trying to force yourself into a mold where you don't fully belong? Or will you embrace the extraordinary responsibility and privilege of bringing to this era something it is missing? Frankl went through Auschwitz and emerged not broken, but strengthened in his conviction that life has meaning in any circumstance, that the last of human freedoms can never be taken from us. Your temporal displacement is infinitesimal compared to what Frankl faced, but the principle is the same. You have the freedom to choose your attitude, to transform suffering into contribution, to fulfill a meaning that only you can fulfill. This is not superficial self-help or empty positive thinking. It is truth tested in the furnaces of Auschwitz, validated in decades of clinical practice, confirmed by the experience of countless individuals who have transformed their mismatches into unique contributions. You were not born in the wrong era. You were born exactly when and where you needed to be born to fulfill a purpose that only you can fulfill. The question that remains is, will you take on that extraordinary responsibility? Life is waiting for your answer. And that answer will not come through grand pronouncements or sweeping plans, but through the small concrete choices you make today, right now, in the face of the real possibilities your life presents. Choose with courage. Choose with responsibility. Choose meaning.